Chapter 31 Experiment. The walk from the Black Tower Academy to the Black Tower of Magic was long, incredibly so for Ludwig. Because though he followed Van Dijk's confident strides, he felt every step the man took was a weight that kept adding onto Ludwig's mind, pressure so much of it that it was suffocating. And just as the tower was in full view did the tower master speak. "Ludwig," he said. "Yes, master," Ludwig replied coyly. Van Dijk turned to face Ludwig and said, "Why did you kill Thomas Vondel?" he asked. Ludwig couldn't tell him because he happened to be the most optimal and fastest way for him to meet with Necros. "He asked for it. He came at me with eyes screaming bloody murder," Ludwig replied. "Patience is a good virtue to have in a mage. Could you not have solved it normally? Escaping or calling a teacher would have diffused the situation instantly," Van Dijk said. "Patience for humans isn't something I'm equipped with, Master Van Dijk," Ludwig said. Van Dijk smiled. "You got me. I keep forgetting that you're a monster. Regardless, I'm glad you killed him," Van Dijk said as he turned around. That was strange, Ludwig thought. He believed that Van Dijk would scold him for killing a noble. "That means that you have no fear for the royalty nor the nobles. I need someone like that in the future," he said as he moved ahead, urging Ludwig to follow behind him. "You see, if you actually shied away from fighting back, or ran away, or even cried for help, I would have discarded you as my disciple there and then. I have no need for those who cannot defend themselves, or at least try doing so. Today I'll teach you something, personally," he said as he climbed up the tower. Ludwig followed behind him. The tower seemed empty as always. "What are you thinking?" Van Dijk asked. "That this tower is pretty big, but there is nothing here but your room," Ludwig said. "Oh, like all other towers. They're built using the magic of the Grey Tower. It has spatial temperance. The tower is far bigger than you think, Ludwig, but only when you graduate will you be able to peer into its secrets," he said as he continued going upward. Once the two of them entered Van Dijk's room, the latter turned to Ludwig and asked him a question. "Ludwig Heart, how long had you spent in this world?" Van Dijk asked. "Today marks my 5th day," Ludwig replied. "And in these 5 days you encountered a good amount of magic, I presume, and read a lot of books on theory and magic properties and even magic history. Tell me then, what is the most important thing a mage should have?" Van Dijk asked. Ludwig rubbed his chin as he thought for a second. "The most important thing? Well, talent for magic is obvious, but that's just too obvious. This is a tricky question. Having loads of mana would help in using great spells. Having talents make able to climb the ranks of mags and have more circles easily. But all of that is conditional. Van Dijk's question is far too specific for something too conditional to be an answer." Ludwig looked at Van Dijk's eyes and said, "Imagination," he said. Van Dijk's lips contorted in a vicious smile that would curdle blood. "And how did you come to that conclusion?" he asked. Ludwig pointed at Van Dijk. Your black flames, they're not something anyone can learn, they're self-created. Making them a personal magic with far more danger than anything I've seen. Even Thomas Vondel used flames with what I could see to have a higher output of mana than yours. But your flames would easily burn rock and steel and even one's soul. While he barely burnt a patch in a dense forest. He had the talent since he was a noble and it didn't serve him much. He also had the mana of a mage and he still died. But he didn't use his imagination. If I were him, I wouldn't shoot flames in a frost. I'd chase my opponent with other tools." "What other tools?" Van Dijk said as his smile grew even more vicious. "Though I don't know of such, and I was late in joining the academy, I do know that they learned many other types of basic magic from some notes of a classmate. If I were him, I'd use the wind to track my opponent and listen in on them. Or use hexes to exhaust, fatigue, and over-encumber my enemy. I'd take my time hunting them down before I get too overworked with useless emotions like anger." "Good, that's a passing answer," he said as he turned and pulled a small booklet from under the pile of books on his desk and gave it to Ludwig. "You have obtained detailed notes of an advanced magic study. Mana control." Ludwig took the book note and began admiring the complexity of what was written within. "Imagination, or imagery, is the basis of all magic," he said, as he raised a finger up, lighting up a small flame. How would you increase the power of this flame if you have little mana to fuel it? Van Dijk asked. Ludwig thought for a moment. Oxygen, Ludwig said. Van Dijk frowned. I heard that term. It came from a former hero. That's a word for a particle you guys said that is part of air itself, Van Dijk said. Ludwig remembered then that he wasn't the only one to ever be summoned to this world. Yes, the air around us, or in my former world, was composed of almost 80% nitrogen, and almost 20% air, with a small percentile of other gases in between. The oxygen is what allows fire to inflame and burn, so if you add more oxygen to it, it should grow in size without needing to fuel it with mana, Ludwig said. I see, it is close enough to what we have here. We simply fuel it with wind magic, Van Dijk said, and the flame grew stronger. But how do you make it like this? Van Dijk said, and the flames turned pitch black. The pressure they gave off became terribly suffocating that Ludwig knew that if he were to touch that flame, his entire body would be lit and smoldered in matters of seconds. Hatred, Ludwig said. Van Dijk's smile turned to a wide grin that showed all his teeth. Yes. Indeed. Hatred. Hatred against all. Rage against all and most importantly cruelty against all. Fueling magic with mana is mighty, but fueling it with emotion is far more superior. This flame was something I created due to my hatred against myself at the first place. It's a flame that has one goal: to consume anything it touches until nothing is left, and will never be snuffed. That is how much my hatred runs, he said, and snapped his fingers, causing the flame to extinguish. Imagination fuels creation, and emotion fuels result. But a mage needs efficiency in all to achieve success. That is the reason why I gave you that book. Though your mana is far too little compared to all former heroes, maybe because you lost your chance to be one, but with that notebook you'll be able to channel your mana far easier. Sadly, you can never create a mana circle, Van Dijk said. Ludwig frowned. Why not? He asked. Because you have no heart, Van Dijk said. I tried hard to come up with ways, even finding a replacement heart, and I even tried using your former one, but none of that worked. Oh, by the way, your remains have been cremated. Ludwig didn't really express much after hearing that, but the fact that he couldn't become a mage was still frustrating. Can I not even use skill books? Ludwig asked. Ha! A look of disgust appeared on Van Dijk's face. Skill books is magic of the weak and the pompous who use gold instead of their mind. I came up with something better than a magic circle, Van Dijk said. Ludwig frowned. What do you mean? He asked. Simple, I'll make you a personal one. One that no other can ever have nor dream of obtaining. A mana circuit that's grafted on your own bones, bit by painful bit. A Van Dijk special, he said as he spread his arms and laughed like a maniac. Guess it's time for me to be a guinea pig. New side quest. Survive Van Dijk's experiment. You must not try and run away. This experiment will test your mental fortitude. Great. Chapter 32 Nephilium. Inside a well-lit chamber of the Black Tower, Van Dijk stood laughing like a maniac. His voice echoed off the high, sterile walls, blending with the scrape of surgical tools and the faint hum of magical enchantments surrounding the room. This was no ordinary operation. It was the first of its kind in this world. The space was a bizarre amalgamation of science and sorcery. Shelves were lined with jars containing odd, preserved specimens, glimmering potions, and grotesque organs that seemed to pulsate faintly, as though still alive. In the center of it all was a marble table, its surface scattered with bone dust, where the skeletal form of Ludwig lay motionless. Several of Ludwig's bones bore freshly carved grooves, intricate channels that seemed to snake their way across his frame, connecting and branching in complex patterns. Each cut was deliberate, every groove a piece of some grand, meticulous design. Tools lay discarded nearby, saws dulled by the relentless work Van Dijk had performed. The marble beneath Ludwig was streaked with fine lines of dust, the byproduct of hours of carving. Van Dijk inspected his work, tilting his head as if appraising a masterpiece. Good, good, he muttered with manic glee, reaching for another saw, and dipping it into a nearby vial filled with holy water. His grin widened. You're faring nicely. You're suffering critical damage to the integrity of your skeleton body. You are being afflicted with holy damage. -1 strength. -1 strength. Every stroke of the saw sent a wave of searing agony through Ludwig. The holy water soaked into the blades, ensuring that each cut burned not just his body but his very essence. The strength that once coursed through his skeletal frame dwindled rapidly, his stats plummeting toward 0. For an undead, pain should have been a foreign concept, but this was different. The holy infused tools attacked the core of his being, bypassing the numbness that typically shielded him from such torment. Each motion of the saw was a battle against madness. Van Dijk worked with eerie calm. His focus was unwavering though sweat constantly poured down his forehead as he switched to a fresh saw. "It is fortunate we're doing this before your bone density matures," he remarked. His voice was calm, clinical, as though he were lecturing a class. Once it hardens further, carving these channels would have been far more troublesome. To Ludwig, the comment was surreal, almost insulting. Troublesome? If this was his version of easy, Ludwig didn't want to imagine what harder would have been like. After 4 grueling hours, Ludwig lay still, his body barely holding itself together. His skeletal frame, once sturdy and resilient, now resembled cracked porcelain. Any movement risked shattering the brittle remains of his form. The channels carved into his bones connected seamlessly, an intricate network that converged at a small, thumb-sized hole in his forehead, a focal point for the magic yet to come. "How are you feeling?" Van Dijk asked, wiping bone dust from his hands as if he'd just finished a routine task. Ludwig could see that this operation wasn't taxing on only him, but the incredible focus that Van Dijk was on and stayed on for hours was something to be respected. Though he was suffering the pain, Van Dijk felt like the one feeling it. Like a corpse. Ludwig managed weakly, his voice dry and humorless. Van Dijk barked a laugh. "Ha! You still have your sanity. Good. That means the easier part is done." Ludwig's non-existent stomach dropped. If this was the easy part, he dreaded to think what lay ahead. He briefly entertained thoughts of escape, anything to avoid the hell that surely awaited him. Van Dijk, noticing his expression, smirked. "Relax, I'm joking," he said, though his grin suggested otherwise. "Honestly, you did better than I expected. I figured the holy water alone might kill you. But you see why it was necessary, don't you?" "Holy water stops the undead from healing," Ludwig muttered, still reeling from the experience. "Exactly," Van Dijk replied, his tones suddenly earnest. "These channels need to stay precisely as they are, at least for the next few hours. Without the holy water, your body's natural restorative properties would seal them up before we're done. And all of this," he gestured broadly to the carved grooves, "would be for nothing." From a nearby shelf, Van Dijk retrieved a vial of bubbling silver liquid. "Now comes the real artistry," he said with a tone of reverence. "Most peep believe mithril to be the ultimate mana conductor," Van Dijk continued, pacing as he spoke. "And it's true, mithril is versatile. It's rare, durable, and can be forged into practically anything. Some make mighty shields and armor from it. Some make treasured weapons that are incredible at conducting mana, and some can even forge it to be as thin as a fabric that one can wear. This very robe of mine is such an example." Van Dijk flexed his wealth. "But another conductor with much greater in performance. And it is simply silver. Silver is far superior at conducting raw mana. The only problem is its rigidity, which makes it unsuitable for most practical uses." He held the vial closer to Ludwig's face. "This is something that is of a higher grade than mithril, and better than silver. The best of both worlds." Van Dijk held the vial up to the light, the liquid within shimmering unnaturally. Its surface seemed alive, writhing as if aware of its surroundings. "This, Ludwig, is nephilium, or as some call it, God's blood. It's harvested from angels, and it is the rarest material you'll ever encounter. A single drop could buy an entire city." Ludwig's blue flames for eyes narrowed as he studied the vial. The liquid looked deceptively simple, yet its aura sent shivers down his spine. Ludwig's voice came out hoarse. "If it's divine, won't it kill me?" Van Dijk's grin widened. "Normally, yes. But not everything that is related to gods and angels is divine, after all. Fallen angels, for example, are a different story. Their blood is no longer holy in the traditional sense. It's tainted. That makes it dangerous, yes, but not outright fatal. To you, that is. If a human were to touch this thing, they'd turn to mush. For an undead, well, it's quite painful, he added, almost cheerfully, as he uncorked the vial. Without hesitation, Van Dijk poured the liquid onto Ludwig's exposed bones. Ludwig's body convulsed violently as the Nephilium seeped into the grooves carved into his skeleton. His bones vibrated unnaturally, softening and twisting as the liquid spread. The pain was beyond comprehension, unlike anything he'd endured during the carving. He wanted to scream, but the agony stole his voice, leaving only soundless gasps. "Ah, magnificent," Van Dijk said, watching the reaction with fascination. "Do you feel it, Ludwig? The power seeping into you? Of course, you can't appreciate it now, not through all that pain. But you're alive, well, as alive as you can be. That's what makes you special." Deus Necros Chapter 33 Upgrades People. Upgrades. Van Dijk's grin remained unwavering as Ludwig's body twisted under the effects of the Nephilium. The liquid coursed through the carved channels in his bones, glowing faintly as it worked its way deeper into his skeletal frame. The vibrations were almost unbearable, the silver substance making Ludwig's very essence feel malleable, as if he were about to crumble into dust. Though the blood of angels is fatal to undead, the blood of fallen angels carries a different property, Van Dijk said, his voice steady, even as Ludwig's body convulsed violently. "It's still highly toxic to creatures like you. But toxic doesn't mean fatal. It means transformative." Ludwig wanted to respond, to curse, to tell Van Dijk to go to hell, but the sheer pain rendered him silent. His skeletal body spasmed uncontrollably, his mind teetering on the brink of madness. The silver liquid seeped into every groove, every crevice, spreading an unnatural warmth that made his entire form feel as though it was both melting and solidifying at once. "Ah, I see that look," Van Dijk continued, his tone almost conversational as he observed Ludwig's agony. "You're wondering why this hasn't been done before, aren't you? The answer is simple, my dear apprentice. No one survives it. Trolls, ogres, werewolves, even chimeras, all of them succumb to the process. Not even their famed regenerative properties can handle the transformation." He leaned in closer, his grin now almost predatory. "But you're different. You're already dead. No pain, no matter how intense, will kill you. And unlike most undead, you're not some mindless husk. Your mind remains intact, able to withstand the effects of the Nephilium." Ludwig's body bucked violently, his skull slamming against the marble table. His eye sockets dimmed momentarily, flickering like a candle in a strong wind. Van Dijk seemed unfazed, stepping back slightly to observe the silver liquid as it began to solidify within the carved channels. "You're probably curious about the history of this material," Van Dijk said, pacing slightly. "Its first name, long before it became known as Nephilium, was delirium. Fitting, isn't it? They called it that because anyone who came into contact with it lost their minds. Even the strongest necromancers couldn't control the undead they subjected to it. They'd go feral, maddened by the process." He gestured toward Ludwig's trembling form. "But you? Look at you. Still conscious, still aware. A little worse for wear, perhaps, but certainly not feral. That's why you're perfect for this." As the liquid began to stabilize, Ludwig felt the pain recede slightly. His bones stopped convulsing, the vibrations slowing to a halt. The glowing channels dimmed, settling into a faint, steady light. Van Dijk reached for a small, gleaming object on his desk, a jewel-shaped blue mana stone. "This," he said, holding it aloft, "is your key to the next step." He approached Ludwig's head, carefully fitting the stone into the carved hole in his forehead. The fit was seamless, as though the stone had been made for him. The moment it clicked into place, Ludwig's entire body pulsed with energy. A low hum filled the room as the silver circuits in his bones lit up once more, brighter this time, radiating power. The pain was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sensation of potential. Ludwig could feel it, mana coursing through his body like a river, flowing through the intricate pathways etched into his skeleton. It was unlike anything he'd felt before, raw and unrestrained. Van Dijk stepped back, admiring his work. Congratulations, Ludwig. You've survived. Few can claim that honor. A series of notifications flashed in Ludwig's mind, their words crisp and clear. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Congratulations. You have successfully survived Van Dijk's experiment. The substat, intelligence, has been upgraded to wisdom. The substat, charisma, has been added to your substats. Charisma increases your personal appeal to others, and also increases your ability to lead. The angel's blood in you has increased your charisma stat by a base of 20. Charisma can also enhance the speed in which the flow of mana goes through the pathways of the carved Nephilim circuit. Wisdom increases the capacity of your mana and the potency of all magic-related abilities. It does not increase your mental wisdom, however. You have gained Blessed Body. Blessed Body, permanent passive. Effects. You are now able to grow your magic power infinitely. The limitations of your mana pool have been lifted. If you wish to turn to a mage-type undead, you no longer need to create a life vassal. If you wish to proceed following the mage path, you no longer need to create magic circles to use higher tiers of magic. Your Blessed Body is currently at the beginner level. Blessed Body can be leveled up by increasing your Wisdom stat. It can also be enhanced further up by consuming more Nephilim. You have obtained Basic Mana Crystal. You can now use up to second circle level magic. All first circle level magic's potency and casting speed had slightly improved. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Ludwig sat up slowly, his movements cautious as he adjusted to the newfound power flowing through him. He could see the mana coursing through the Nephilim circuits, weaving intricate paths through his body. The faint glow of the mana stone in his forehead gave him a sharp, otherworldly presence. That stone, Van Dijk said sharply, breaking Ludwig's thoughts, is your limit for now. Don't even think about upgrading it. Magic must be earned, not given. When you've proven yourself ready, I'll provide a more advanced stone. Until then, this will suffice. Ludwig nodded, though his mind was racing. The power surging through him was intoxicating. He flexed his hands experimentally, feeling the circuits respond with an efficiency he had never known. The mana flowed effortlessly, ready to obey his command. Van Dijk's grin widened, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. The higher your level, the more Nephilim you'll need. With each addition, the circuits will grow denser, and your magical capabilities will expand. This is my gift to you, Ludwig, a creation no one else could ever dream of. He stepped closer, his expression darkening slightly. So don't disappoint me. With this power, you will shake the very foundations of this world. And perhaps. His voice trailed off, a dangerous edge creeping into his tone. Perhaps you'll help me settle a score or two. Ludwig met Van Dijk's gaze, the faint glow of the mana stone in his forehead reflecting the determination in his eyes. Whatever this new power was, he intended to make it his own. Chapter 34 A Strange Academy. Ludwig's body tingled. The sensation of mana coursing through him was new to him and felt rather refreshing. His former skeleton body, though, had mana, he didn't feel it to this extent. Now he can see it all around him and within him far clearer than before. Put the slime back on, Van Dijk said as he wiped the rest of the bone dust off his hands. You should also head back to the academy once morning comes. Take your remaining time to study up. I heard you have alchemy class. The teacher is rather peculiar, Van Dijk said. Peculiar? More than you? I highly doubt that. Ludwig's thoughts remained inward. Van Dijk soon left the lab, leaving a portal for Ludwig to leave from after him. The latter placed the slime back on and it soon morphed onto his body, giving him the appearance of a human. Though the soul-letting lantern clearly stated that no one who does not already know of Ludwig's current undead situation will be able to see him as anything other than a human, it was better to have that fake layer of protection for his own sense of self. He didn't want to always look down and see nothing but bones. Once Ludwig wore his clothes, he left to Van Dijk's office. He proceeded with reading the available books to him, but once again his mind was rattled due to the difficulty of the task. Your wisdom level is far below the required needed to read through this book. Ludwig ignored the notification as he began reading with the mother of all pain racking his brain. Hours later, Ludwig ended his session when the sun began breaking. Dawn had passed and he needed to head to the academy again. After packing, he hurriedly left the tower and made it before the time for class would start. But something was different today. Everyone was giving him strange looks as he passed through the halls of the academy. "Did you hear? They said that he killed Thomas Vondel." "Yeah, I heard. And if not for Tower Master Van Dijk, he'd be dead by now. I heard that Ravi Vondel is still looking for him. He can't do much inside the school, but I wonder what would happen if he leaves." The rumors and the gossip were something that Ludwig never experienced in the real world, and only heard about and read about in books and novels. It was a new experience for him, and all he could do was snicker as he went past the students who continued talking about him. Ludwig arrived to the classroom, which was a junction of both a massive botanical garden and a classroom at the same time that was packed full of all sorts of conserved organs and colorful liquids on shelves and walls. There were even skeletal frames for study, none of which were human. Some of the students were already seated, and while Ludwig entered late, he wasn't the last one. Cassandra noticed Ludwig entering, and he saw her too, but she soon turned her head. Did she also hear the rumors? He thought. But it wasn't something he could control. He went up the rows and sat in an empty seat. "You really survived that," Ludwig heard. Turning, it was Hoyo, the guy who warned him about what was going to happen. Ludwig wasn't a big fan of this guy since he knew that Ludwig indeed was the cause of Thomas's death. "Keep everything to yourself. You hear me?" Ludwig warned. Don't worry, I won't talk about this to anyone," Hoyo replied in a hushed tone. "Anyways, the two bastards who were with him are looking for you however," he said. "Did you not hear what I just said?" Ludwig warned in a sterner tone, and Hoyo simply backed off. Ludwig knew well that though Van Dijk covered for him, at the end of the day someone did actually die and Ludwig was the only suspect. Even with an alibi, people tend to focus their nonsensical accusation on the only available suspect, disregarding facts. Unless another person comes up and is blamed for the death of Thomas, it will always leave a stain on Ludwig that he was the cause of that death regardless of the alibi. "Good morning, young ones," a calm feminine and charming voice echoed through the classroom. The teacher that just entered seemed to be in her mid-20s and looked quite charming. A pretty-looking woman with a gentle and bright smile, wearing the academy's teacher gowns and hugging a large leather book to her chest. But something wasn't right, as Ludwig's new body had allowed him to use even more of his discerning powers. The same powers that allowed him to see Van Dijk's flame and the path of mana. He raised his brows up and was absolutely baffled by what he just saw. The illusion of that appearance, that gentle country girl appearance who came here to teach, simply dissipated in front of his eyes as he saw what lay beneath. "A demon," he muttered, low enough that no one could hear it. It was so low that even the student next to him couldn't pick it up. But the teacher in question had her eyes snap right onto Ludwig's. Golden eyes with a cat-like slit for irises. A beautifully carved face, enough that would make any man fall for her in an instant. A mix of vivid purple and black shortcut hair, and two long curving horns, along with a viscous, scandalous almost-looking body. Two massive mounds of fat hung on barely able straps that held them with difficulty. With a thin waistline and a demonically curving ass. Thighs barely held together with tight-looking stockings held with a hold-up that extended up her skirt and only God knows where they were attached to. And a thin tail seemed to sway from behind her left and right, almost inviting even. She wore an incredibly tall stiletto that seemed to be holding itself with an almost needle-width heel. "You're new here. It's not gentlemanly to stare, you know," Ludwig heard right into his mind. "You don't need to reply, dear undead. Keep what you just saw a secret. However, not many know what I am," she said. That was the most obvious. "Shut up and pay attention to class," Ludwig had ever heard before. Ludwig nodded in acceptance, but before he could even act, Necro's blessing is activating. Oh shit no. Ludwig cursed inwardly as he knew what was going to happen. Inspect. Fuck. Character screen. Name, Cymoria Asmiralis. Title: A Manslayer. Consumed the vitality of 100 men in one night. Level: HP. Status effect: Intermediate polymorph. Lore: A succubus who once led the largest information-gathering hub of the country. After her identity as a demon was exposed, she was chased by the Holy Order and found solace in the bosom of the Dark Tower Academy. Now she works as a teacher for the academy and is teaching students the art of alchemy. Agin. The professor moaned. The sound was loud and prefoliation enough that everyone in the classroom was too stunned to speak. The kind-looking teacher can make sounds like that? Ludwig gulped hard as he saw the angry look in the teacher's eyes which were locked onto him. Fuck. Chapter 35 Alchemy Session. Ahem. The teacher didn't press further as she began explaining today's class. Today, we'll be talking about the properties of the Drakebane grass. Who can tell me what is Drakebane? Cymoria asked. Cassandra was the only student who raised her hand. Cassandra, go ahead, the teacher said as she nodded toward her. Drakebane, or the dragon scourge, is a rare herb that grows in hot environments. It has a growth cycle of 10 years before it reaches maturity and has a single-day time span for harvesting. The plant releases all its spores to propagate during that day and will wither the following day. And the reason it's potent against dragons is that it's able to burn their mana rapidly and exhaust them. Cassandra said. Good answer, the teacher nodded. But there are a few misconceptions that most books don't talk about, the teacher said. Anyone? The teacher asked as she looked around. Ludwig had no idea what they were talking about. He wasn't interested in alchemy after all, and from what he read, nothing had come in close to that subject. So like everyone else in the class, he just sat waiting for someone to answer. Right, first things first, Drakebane is called that way because of a specific reason. Drakes are not dragons. Otherwise it would have been called Dragon's Bane. The property of burning mana is true and very effective against Drakes. They aren't true dragons after all, and their mana is a mix of both natural and true dragon mana. Draconic mana is incredibly pure and chaotic and can easily neutralize Drakebane. And finally, Drakebane can be grown at a faster rate than the natural 10-year cycle. And we have some of it available right here, she said as she pointed at everyone's desk. Under your desks, there is a small lab kit. Please pull it out, she said. Ludwig did as told, and pulled a small black box up, placing it on top of his table. The box opened up, revealing a magic circle in the middle of the box as it spread apart to form a hardened rectangular table. There were several closed vials on the table and multiple strands of different grasses neatly assorted on the alchemy table. This is a basic alchemy table that anyone can obtain. Now, what I want you to do is to follow me in creating a sundering potion. This potion uses the properties of Drakebane, which burns mana and is further amplified by some of the herbs that are in front of you, she said. But teacher, one of the students said, all of these herbs look similar. That's why we're doing this experiment. After all, we studied about all of these herbs during the semester. I expect you to have done your homework and learned the properties and the differences between all of them. She said. But, he said in a defeated tone, but the teacher ignored him. Now, students, first things first, light up your alchemy circle by simply injecting your mana into it. She pressed her palm on the table and immediately the circle on her own table lit up in a blood-red hue. Ludwig was a bit confused at first. He didn't study any of this, and compared to the rest of his class he was clearly behind them all. He didn't understand anything in front of him, nor did he recognize the hers. The guy who spoke earlier described Ludwig's situation pretty clearly. But he wasn't someone who'd easily give up. After all, Ludwig's eyes were focused on the teacher as he muttered, "Trace." Immediately, a faint holographic appearance of his own body appeared in front of him, alongside with several pieces of side notes for informations. Inspect has activated. ****. Flaming lotus fire, a toxic herb that can cause blisters and high temperature rise once consumed unprocessed. It is also an alchemically used herb that can increase the temperature of materials once alchemy is applied. Riverside grass shamrock, normal grass that can be found anywhere in the world alongside rivers. It holds no special properties. Drakebane biohazard symbol, a flower-type herb that has the properties of sundering mana. It is incredibly toxic to all sub-dragon species if directly injected into their blood. The effect is incredibly minor if only the flower part of the plant is used like what most do today. The mix of both roots and the flower part increases the potency but at the same time creates instability in the potions made. Ice pearl, a small pearl found in the stomach of glacial clams. It holds great freezing properties and can neutralize heat once it comes in contact with it. Unprocessed troll's blood, an incredibly powerful agent that can easily absorb all matters of traits into it. It has a high regenerative property and by itself can help heal wounds. Though untreated it can cause many issues to a human's body. It is mainly used in creating health and mana potions, but is almost the #1 go-to when creating any type of potions. There were several other pieces of weeds and all sort of liquids, but just these caught Ludwig's attention, because they all seemed to have a purpose. For example, the riverside grass was useless, uncompetitively so and had no properties, but it held a striking resemblance to drakebane. And this told Ludwig that this was meant to confound and confuse the students. Along with several other herbs that looked like the flaming lotus, and a few vials of liquids of varying shades of blue that looked similar to troll's blood. The ice pearl, however, seemed to be there in case shit went wrong and the whole thing began to burn. The first thing she did was hold the ice pearl. In case things go wrong, throw this in your pot. It will instantly stop all the reactions, she said and placed the pearl to the side. We start by grinding the flower of the drakebane, and since it's already dried up, you can simply crush it between your palms like this, she said as the material turned to powder and began falling on a small pot she had ready on top of the alchemy table. Everyone did the same when they began mimicking her. And so did Ludwig. He followed Trace and grabbed the appropriate piece of grass, while many others seemed to grab the closest looking one. Then add some troll's blood. Though this is unprocessed, it should still serve the same purpose, she said as she poured in an incredibly accurate amount and left a bit in the bottle. Ludwig noticed her carefully hiding away the bottle. It seems that there is a need to be specific, and thanks to Trace, he managed to get an almost exact recreation of her own action. He continued following her, and while she was adding more and more herbs, several pots began overboiling or turning stale. Some students, seeing things going ugly, immediately threw the ice pearl into their pots, making the whole thing turn to an ice sculpture in the blink of an eye. While some blew up outright, stanching up the place, but thanks to the teacher being already aware of the dangers, whenever something bad was about to happen, she'd cover the pots of the students with her own mana, enclosing the explosions or the overflows. There was nothing she could do about the smell though. Ludwig wasn't affected by the smells. After all, he was an undead, but many others threw up outright or just left the room in a rush. The teacher paid them no mind as she continued adding more and more materials. Good. Now if you wait for about 10 seconds, the concoction you have in front of you should turn a bright yellow if it's done correctly. The closer the color it is to red, the worse the quality, and the closer it is to gold, the purer the quality, she said. Everyone's who managed to follow her, or close enough, seemed to have a varying shade of red. Cassandra was the only one who had an orange color concoction. Ludwig, on the other hand, had a clear golden solution in front of him. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. You have created a potion. Incomplete weak mana sundering potion, biohazard symbol. Toxic for consumption. A potion made by a novice alchemist wannabe. It is incredibly weak and serves almost no purpose. Though it is a step in the right way, if this is used on a Drake-type creature it will only enrage them. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. This notification was bothering Ludwig. Not only did it say that whatever he made wasn't really that good, it also didn't pop something important in front of him. The notification of him receiving the alchemy skill never appeared. The teacher noticed Ludwig's concoction and smiled. But he then did something different. He grabbed the roots of the drakebane and began grinding them. What are you doing? The teacher asked Ludwig. Oh, I want to try something, he said. She frowned while everyone seemed annoyed at him. After all, for him who got the closest to the teacher's concoction, he didn't need to brag some more saying he wanted to try something. He already succeeded, but most of them hoped he'd do so he can mess up what he created. The teacher, however, didn't stop him and continued monitoring the rest of the students and taking notes of their progress. While Ludwig grinded the roots and added them to the mix, the whole pot began burning up some more. He then grabbed the pearl and broke it apart, and began adding smaller and smaller pieces of the pearl into the pot to lower its temperature. Soon, however, the liquid's boiling began slowing down bit by bit and began simmering. Not only that, the color itself began changing from gold to a purer and cleaner version until it became milky white. The solution seemed to stay stagnant at that point, and only then did Ludwig receive a notification. ****. You have created your first true alchemy potion. Intermediate mana sundering potion biohazard symbol. A reliable potion created by an ambitious young alchemist. It boasts great effects in sundering subdraconic species of their mana. *****. The teacher approached Ludwig and smiled. Good job, Ludwig. She said. But teacher. One of the students jumped up. He didn't follow the recipe, he said. The teacher turned to him and said, many things in alchemy are still undiscovered. If we all followed the footsteps of someone who had done it before, we'll never learn. Ludwig understood the principle behind this alchemy. The true use of the drakebane flower is when one mixes both the roots and the flower. For it to have maximum efficiency, but that makes the solution unstable and will burn up faster. And using the ice pearl to stop that reaction will instantly freeze over the entire pot. Ludwig seemed to have realized that from watching the students who used the pearl to stop their pots from blowing up, and thus broke the pearl to pieces so he can use only bits and pieces to cool it down instead of freezing it. It takes a strong mind to do alchemy among chaos, but an even stronger mind to come up with innovative ways to succeed in creation. Good job, Ludwig. I'll make sure to add this to your final results. Keep it up, the teacher explained. Chapter 36 Learning. Hold on, Ludwig heard as he was leaving the room. Looking behind him, Ludwig saw Cassandra with a frustrated look on her face. What is it? Ludwig asked. How did you do that? She asked him. How did you figure out the way to make that potion? The teacher herself didn't say anything, and the herbs, they all look similar. Ludwig looked at her own potion and noticed that it was incredibly close to what the teacher had made. Analysis, Ludwig said. That's a really terrible way of explaining things. She replied. Ludwig thought for a moment. He couldn't just tell her that he could see the specific details of the herbs thanks to his system, so he needed a way to convince her. The teacher made sure to display the ice pearl to us and show us that it is important. But honestly, that felt like a trick, because there are dozens of ways to shut down an alchemical reaction that doesn't need the pearl, he said. I suppose that's right. She did stop some explosions using her own magic. And that was all I needed to know, that the pearl's primary objective wasn't to shut down the reaction, so it must have another purpose, and seeing that using the whole pearl immediately freezes the pot, if I were to use smaller portions of it, it would cool down the incredibly volatile reaction, he added. That, logical, she replied reluctantly. And if the pearl is needed, then that means that I need a way to increase the temperature of the concoction, Ludwig said as he pointed at a busted pot from one of the students. That guy, he used the flower and the roots of the drakebane, and the temperature of the whole thing rose up incredibly. So I assumed by doing that, I can increase the heat, and by adding pieces of the pearl I can cool it down without it freezing. So I tried it, and it worked. Ludwig replied while shrugging. That's a lot of baseless assumptions, Cassandra said. The first alchemist also began by making assumptions and attempts. I believe the goal of this class isn't to teach you alchemy, but to teach us how to think outside the box and take our own path forward. If we just replicate what others have made, we won't learn, we'll only be a replica of someone else's efforts, is what I believe. Ludwig finalized his words, leaving Cassandra to her thoughts. Just as he left the room, he heard students talking about him in hushed tones. I can't believe that guy. You saw how he was acting in class, being all haughty and stuff. Yeah, he was saying he didn't know much on his first day, but now he's good at alchemy, and you remember people saying he did use exhaust. Yeah, the rumors of him killing Thomas are probably true. If he's that good, he could have easily done that. He probably said that he didn't know anything about magic the first day to make us drop our guards. The words continued on, and Ludwig didn't humor any of them as he went past the students and outside the halls of the academy. He sighed a bit, and thought of what he was going to do for the rest of the day. The shouts and cries of battle from afar piqued his interest, and he once again found himself headed toward the training area for the swordsmen of the academy. The teacher there was diligently guiding everyone to follow her pace and practice. And once she saw Ludwig, "You got here on time, everyone. Halt," she said, and everyone in the area stopped. "This is Ludwig Heart. Some of you know him," she said. The students all took note of Ludwig, and some even began talking about last night's incident. "He will be joining your training from here onwards," she said. "Ludwig, I believe you somewhat managed the first level of the Imperial art," she said. "To an extent," Ludwig replied. "Good, then grab a training sword and follow everyone's moves," she said as she began swinging. Everyone followed her, and so did Ludwig as he stood at the last row, making sure that every swing of his was perfectly following the trace projection in front of him. Time went by as Ludwig followed the teachings of Joanna, and the whole class seemed to get drenched in sweat and exhaustion after the first 2 hours. And 4 more hours, the area looked almost void of life. Some had outright fallen unconscious, while many others gave up as their arms felt numb. There were only 2 students left who were still following the teacher. Ludwig, of course, since he had no concept of stamina, and a young man who Ludwig remembers from the first time he came to this place. "All right, kids, stop or your arms will fall off," the teacher said. Only then did the student that survived with Ludwig fall to his knee, gasping for desperate breath. The kid with blue eyes and blue hair looked at Ludwig saying, "You're a monster." "I can say the same to you," Ludwig replied. Though Ludwig was indeed an undead monster that didn't need any stamina to work and move or act, the kid next to him was practically a genius type of monster. A human kid with a stamina that rivals a monster. Good, good. We have promising younglings this year. Von Hubert, you have done well. You should go and rest for now. Ludwig, I need to speak to you for a second, she said. Ludwig followed her to the same room from the last time, and was worried that she might have caught on to what happened yesterday. Just as he entered the training room, she closed it. Show me how much you learned from the Imperial swordsmanship art. Ludwig began tracing the moves, succeeding in connecting the first and second stances in a single flow. This impressed the teacher enough that she held Ludwig hostage for the next 4 hours. Later that night, Ludwig headed back to his room to rest, or more like to continue his mental training. Van Dijk had given Ludwig the book of mana control, and within the book were the first-tier spells of all elemental magic, not including the dark or the light type of magic. His task was simple: to understand the teachings of the book and learn mana control, and have a good start in simple first-tier magic. Ludwig was taking his first steps in becoming a mage. Ludwig flipped the pages as he read, unbeknownst to him that this small book may very well change his entire life and how he views this world. Chapter 37 Grafted. Ludwig closed the book while his head felt like it was throbbing from pain. The whole thing was weird for him. The book was clearly describing handling mana with magic circles, but at the same time, it didn't seem that it was bound to those very laws. Mana, after all, existed everywhere, and only humans were the ones who used magic circles to further advance their prowess. For Ludwig, who had no heart to build his circles, he had Nephilium, which served as a more advanced, denser, and far higher conductive mana circuit. It could do all that a magic circle can do, but the majority of the tips and help were focused on what magic and mana itself could do, not the circuits or circles themselves. Another part was imagination and emotion. Emotion was something that Van Dijk had already explained, as it fuels the magic you want. For heat, it's passion, and water is compassion, while the deeper and darker magic require more emotions to further fuel them, such as rage and anger or even love. Emotional discipline is needed to advance the usage of all types of magic. The second part was something only the book spoke about, and that was imagination. Magic in its essence could be simplified to basically becoming a series of calculations that adjust the flow of the world itself. To calculate how fast atoms need to move for them to create heat is something that a mage should be able to do, for example. But it can be bypassed when one can imagine and see the way that operation happens. For a flame, one can either use mana and imbue it with a passionate will which will change its form from normal mana to a flaming red mana. But if they add imagination to the mix, and imagine their mana spinning faster, the flame can become something like a flame arrow instead of a fireball. The more one can afflict their mana with powerful imaginations and is able to sustain them, the higher their tier of usable magic can become. That is, of course, if they're still able to maintain calculations of all that is happening. After all, it's not hard to imagine a flaming tornado, but one needs 3 things to create it. First and foremost, mana has the capacity to create something that big. Secondly, the passion and emotional stability to manifest it without it going haywire. And lastly, the ability to calculate, infer, and deduce all that is needed to create the flames from the smallest atom at the base of the tornado to the peak of this flaming cyclone. It's a lot of things that need to happen at once. Some are eased by doing chants that align one's mind with the image they want to create. Some are able to use mediums such as wands or staffs that can ease the computable aspects of such a creation. A mana control, the book itself seemed extremely basic for Ludwig. Yet from it he understood that talent alone is not enough for anyone to be great at magic. For him, however, magic capacity was something he didn't need to care about. For a body of an undead that cares for no pain or agony of the circles, and has his own circuit of nephilium, he isn't limited to what mana amounts he can produce. He is only limited by the quality and quantity of the nephilium inside his body. As for the imaginative and computable part, he boasts an incredible mind that was separated from the necessity of sleep and exhaustion due to him being an undead. A mind that literally has no limit but what he himself can comprehend. As for emotion, that is something that Ludwig knows he lacks a lot and has yet to fully understand them. For someone who spent most of his days sheltered in a gilded cage, with barely a few interaction with friends he never met, Ludwig's emotional growth was extremely stunted, and that would serve as a great setback for the current him. True, I don't know what love is, and I don't know what could make one angry enough to reach the levels of rage and wrath. Even the death of my parents didn't make my heart bleed as many say it does for them. Not even when I killed someone did I feel anything. Emotions are difficult. He sighed as he leaned back against his chair. It was deep into the night, and he needed to do something to kill the time. He has another class the next morning. Just as he was about to switch to training his swordsmanship, he heard a knock on his door. Wary and slightly alerted, Ludwig asked, "Who is it?" "It's me, Hoyo," the boy said. Ludwig sighed as he opened the door. "What is it that you want?" he said through an annoyed-looking face. "Just wanted to talk to you about something," Hoyo said as he placed his foot on the door. "I'll crush that foot if you don't move it," Ludwig replied in a serious tone. The boy held both hands up. "Okay, no feet on the door. But really, I need to talk to you about something serious." Ludwig sighed. "What is it this time? Surely not someone who wants me dead again." "Oh, no, well, the 2 minions of Thomas want to have their revenge, but I doubt they'll do anything overt. Regardless, this is more about me." "You? What is it? Are you the one who want me dead?" Ludwig smirked. "No, I just have a favor to ask you." "Is it about you being grafted?" "Why, you haven't said or talked to anyone about that, right? And if I did, what will you do?" Ludwig asked. The look of despair showed on Hoyo's face was a clear indication that something was awfully wrong with this guy being found out as a grafted. "Get in," Ludwig said. Hoyo walked inside with a lowered head and sat on an empty chair. "So, about this grafted thing, tell me, why do you have the liver of a harpy grafted on your body?" Ludwig asked while his eyes were shining blue unbeknownst and invisible to Hoyo's stunned-looking face. Chapter 38 Fallen Nobility. "How much do you know about that?" Hoyo asked. "Enough to know that you don't want me to expose you, so speak. Why do you have the liver of a harpy grafted onto you?" Ludwig asked back. Hoyo opened and closed his mouth, then said, "My family is a fallen noble family," he said. Ludwig waited for Hoyo to finish speaking since he seemed to have had a lot on his mind. He sighed a bit and then said, "My father and uncle are sons of a Duke of Latonia, a kingdom on the northern part of the Lufondal Empire. My grandfather died before assigning a proper heir, and that caused strife between the two of them. But thanks to my father's superior military achievements and prowess, not to mention him reaching the level of Aura Swordmaster, he managed to take control over the duchy. He didn't kill my uncle for failing the succession war, and allowed him to live as a marquis with land and forces." Ludwig nodded as he was listening in on the story. But greed is a nasty thing, Hoyo said. My uncle, who didn't accept the fact that he was demoted to a mere marquis, was enraged and began dabbling in darker arts. And this is one of them, Hoyo said as he pulled up his shirt. Several massive sewed scars were visible all over Hoyo's body. It wasn't just the liver of a harpy, there were much more parts that shouldn't have been mine to begin with. Though I managed to extract them and replace them with human parts, I still can't remove the harpy liver. Since it's essential to my survival, Hoyo said. It cleanses blood and removes all sorts of poison and lowers the risk of diseases and infections from the multiple grafting sessions that happened to me. So you were captured and tortured? Ludwig said plainly. There was hesitation in Hoyo's words before he said, why yes, something like that. Then how come your family fell? If your uncle was the one who did all of this, shouldn't it be the other way around? Or did the king simply axe both the duchy and the march? March or marquessate is what you call the territory of a marquis. Will be going with march for now. That's the thing, Hoyo said. The people who did the experiment on me were the people who belonged to our duchy. They were bribed by my uncle and I was experimented on along with several hundred others inside my father's territory. My uncle then sent word to the king that we, the duchy, were dabbling in black magic and forbidden arts, and then initiated the attack on the duchy. Ludwig frowned. I can see how things would turn that way, but you said that you initiated the attack. For a march to attack a duchy, you need significant power. I doubt that the Duke just simply let them in. Yeah, under different scenarios, my father could have easily thwarted the attack of my uncle and found enough evidence to clear his name, but there was a problem that prevented that. And that is? Ludwig asked. The land we lived on was meant to be neutral ground, a shared territory between Latonia and the Holy Order, Hoyo began, his voice trembling as if the very air around him grew colder with each word. Latonia, though it has a king, is nothing but a puppet. In reality, it is a kingdom ruled by zealots, driven by their so-called Holy Order. Rich beyond imagination, powerful, and merciless. Anything they deem dark or demonic, they don't just hate, they eradicate. But none of that compares to him. Hoyo's breath hitched, his eyes glassy with fear, his words faltering as though recalling the memory physically hurt. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a battle. It wasn't even a struggle. It was annihilation. Total, horrifying annihilation. And it took him, Hoyo's voice cracked, less than an hour. Ludwig's frown deepened, his curiosity beginning to feel like a mistake. An hour, Hoyo whispered. That's all it took for our territory to collapse into dust and screams. He wasn't even trying. He walked in, yawning like he was bored, like it was a chore. He couldn't have been more than 10, a child, by any measure. And yet, he choked, unable to meet Ludwig's gaze. He killed every last one of us. Soldiers, knights, warriors. My people died like insects crushed underfoot. No mercy. No hesitation. Hoyo's hand trembled as he gestured vaguely toward the past. And my father didn't even have time to beg. That boy, that thing, looked him in the eye and simply pointed at him. My father burnt in hellish flames in an instant. For him it felt like swatting a fly. My father, who is an aura swordmaster, wasn't even worth the effort for that thing. No words. No reason. Just nothing. Ludwig's blood ran cold. If he had any, that is. They call him the Holy Saint, Hoyo spat, his voice tinged with hatred but trembling with unshakable dread. But there's nothing holy about him. He's a demon in human skin. A sadistic, unfeeling monster. Mot the Deliverer. The name still makes my skin crawl. He shuddered violently, clutching at his arms as though to hold himself together. You don't talk about him. You don't even think about him if you value your sanity. Ludwig thought about this for a second and said, seems like you had it rough, but what I don't understand is, how did you manage to escape? Yeah, about that. Hoyo said, it was because I fell unconscious. Ludwig's expression was anything but understanding. Yeah, apparently, the kid, or that thing, considers all who are asleep or unconscious as dead. Basically, a bay. Ludwig tilted his head. That's a criminally severe understatement, but something along the lines of that. I was captured by the Holy Order forces, and when presented to him in my unconscious state, they decided to simply let me go. Apparently it was his order. What happened with your uncle then? Ludwig asked. What else? Since he was the one who revealed us as sinners, he was rewarded, and with his brother dead, the duchy was vacant, so he simply took over. And your goal, I can assume, is to reclaim what was once yours. Ha! You say funny things, Ludwig. I'm not insane. I know my limits. And I can't go against my uncle. After all, though he isn't a sword user, he's a 7th circle mage. Though most of it is grafted stolen goods. Wait, he grafted a circle? Ludwig asked. Yes, he managed to steal the heart of 7th circle mage and graft it onto his body. That's why he's impossible for me to ever beat. He then looked at Ludwig and smiled. You think I'm a coward, don't you? Not really, Ludwig shook his head. There is a thin line between courage and stupidity, and not wanting to die is everything but stupidity. Hoyo smiled, saying, I guess you're right. I had a really hard time dealing with Thomas, to be honest, he said. I can guess why, Ludwig said. You do. You don't want to expose yourself, though I doubt your identity is fully hidden, Ludwig added. Yes, a few teachers already know of me, but the Dark Academy is unrelated to the Holy Order. Though it is part of the Lufondal Empire, the Holy Order can't just simply ask for my head. I suppose. There are powerful teachers here after all, Ludwig shrugged. Speaking of powerful teachers, tomorrow is the last day before the exams. We'll have our final practice session, though it's going to be the first and last one for your, he said. What practice? Ludwig asked. Magic combat. You didn't know? Hoyo asked. Oh, I forgot about that. I can't use any offensive magic though. Ludwig said. Hoyo frowned. How come? You already used exhaust. Yeah, that's basically all I know. That and the undeath sigil, but he wasn't going to talk about that to Hoyo. After all, necromancy is forbidden. That's going to be tough for you then. I'd recommend that you give up on tomorrow's practice then. A lot of people will be aiming for you, he said. Ludwig thought about it and saw that it was pretty late into the night. He doesn't have time to learn anything that can serve him any good anytime soon. Nor can he go all the way back to Van Dijk. The captured soul Thomas Vondel is requesting your attention. Chapter 39 Conversation. Would you like to have a conversation with Thomas Vondel? You may ignore this if you do not wish to be bothered by trapped souls. Right? Ludwig said to Hoyo. I'll need to rest soon. Yeah, I understand. Sorry about the law drop, but still. Fine, it's not like I have any friends to talk to about this. Regardless, your secret is safe with me, Ludwig replied. Thanks, Hoyo said as he proceeded into leaving the room. Once alone, Ludwig pressed the accept option, and his mind immediately seemed to be warped into the lantern. Inside it he looked massive, incredibly so that Vondel barely reached Ludwig's knee. Vondel had an ethereal, almost transparent look to his body, and fear seemed to grip at his heart. Ludwig. He muttered. I have little patience to those who call me without much to say. Wait, I have something to tell you, Thomas said. What is it? Ludwig asked. About your exam, you said you don't know how to use magic, right? Thomas said. What does that have to do with you calling me here? Ludwig asked. Being dead means that you get to know a few things, like what Bostos van Dijk told you. I guess you've been eavesdropping on me a bit, Ludwig asked. Not like I had any other choice. Thomas said. Not to mention, Ludwig said as he got his face closer to Thomas. You're awfully calm for someone I killed. I thought you'd be a bit rowdier. To what end? Thomas spoke rhetorically. I'm already dead. Life has no meaning, but true death is a bit out of reach. You're now turning to a philosopher, Ludwig snickered. Still state the purpose of you calling me. I have little patience. Right. Thomas thought for a second and said, You're pretty apathetic. Ludwig frowned, inwardly thinking that Thomas though speaks true, and since his death he had little to almost no emotional interest in anything going around him, or to him even was slightly worrying. After all, he literally lost his humanity. He's but an undead now. A smart undead, but undead nevertheless. What does that have to do with anything? Ludwig asked. For someone smart enough to learn all sort of things, you're a bit slow here. Ludwig slammed his fist down right next to Thomas, in anger, or so it appeared. Right there. Thomas pointed. What you just did, you weren't angry, nor did you truly feel mad. You just mimicked it because you can't truly feel anger. You're calling me sociopathic. Ludwig said. Not the exact term I'd use, but pretty close. You really have no empathy and you basically mimic emotions to fit your situation and condition. But deep down you know you don't feel a thing. Ludwig's upper lip curled in disdain. I guess you can show a bit of annoyance, but that isn't helping your case. Your emotional imbalance will hinder you from advancing your magic, or the learning of, Thomas explained shrugging. And what do you suppose I should do? Ludwig asked, tilting his head. I have a solution for you. Well, basically it's something that you were probably going to figure out sooner or later. But if I tell you now, I need you to do me a favor. Thomas asked. Ludwig thought for a moment and said, I can't promise you anything, but I'll hear you out. Ludwig had no intention of trusting someone he killed, even if he was a soul. But he still was interested enough, just enough to try and comprehend what was going on. Okay, it's fine. This lantern is very special, and I've seen what you got the moment you obtained it. You can see the status screen. Ludwig asked. I can see all you see, all the souls can. But I saw a bit more. One of the hidden functions of the lantern, he added. Speak, Ludwig said in a commanding tone. Right, Thomas said, fidgeting a bit. Deus Necros is incredibly smart. He's a deity after all, and he already realized you'd be stunted by your lack of emotion, especially after turning to undeath, so he hid a function in the lantern. Though there are other functions I'm forbidden from speaking about them or my entire existence will be destroyed. I'd rather go back to Necros as a dead soul than simply vanish. You talk a lot of shit. Get to the fucking point, Ludwig said. Yes, I will, anyway. The thing is, though you can't use your own emotions, you can use the emotions of those in the lantern. But it depends on the method they died with, Thomas said. Ludwig thought momentarily and said, You mean I can inherit emotions from those I kill? He asked. Yes, basically the last emotion or slew of, you can inherit, and that can be used to supplement your lack of emotion to empower your spells. You can also learn from the souls you captured any sort of things, but there is a price for that. That sounds interesting, Ludwig said. Yes, for me, well, as awkward it is to say it, I died feeling 3 emotions, Thomas said. Ludwig immediately interjected, rage, despair, and fear. Damn. Thomas looked taken aback. You really just said that? Anyway. Yes, you're right, it was exactly that. And how is that any helpful? Ludwig asked, genuinely interested. Well, rage is part passion, and it is one of the few elements that empower fire magic and destructive magic. Despair is like a quagmire, a swamp of no hope. It empowers magic that caused physical debilitations, like your exhaust, or any lethargy or weakness-inducing magic. And lastly, fear. Fear is cold, and lonely, and an extreme mental destroying disposition. It empowers hallucination magic and all sorts of mental damaging magic. I see your point, but how can I use that? Ludwig asked. Well, I can tell you, but would you hear my favor first? Thomas asked. Chapter 40. A deal with a Webnovel. Ludwig thought for a moment and said, Tell me, what do you want then? Right, see, I have multiple siblings. Though I'm the only true heir of the Webnovel house, well, former heir. And what does that have to do with your request? Ludwig asked. Among all my brothers, Ravi, though his step-sibling, has been the kindest to me. But my mother is adamant about going against him. He made a lot of progress in his studies and did clear a couple of dungeons before he even graduated. He's smart and strong, but his mother isn't a noble, Thomas said. Let me guess, your dad had a thing for the maid? Ludwig asked. More like the red light district, madam. But yeah. And how am I going to help you help him? Ludwig asked. For us Vondels, origin is important. That's for all the nobles in fact. Brother is doing his best to become a knight of Lufondel. And that should give him a noble status, though it is the lowest. Once he achieves that, he can challenge my brothers to be the heir. If I were alive, none of this would have happened, and as soon as I got my hand on the house I would invite my brother back. Sadly that's no longer possible, Thomas said. You want me to help your brother become a knight? You know that you're asking something a bit too insane. No, not that. He's more than capable of doing that by himself. But the thing is, he's missing a key part in getting the right of succession. When us Vondels are born, we're given a ring that helps identify us, and that ring is needed to proceed with the succession battle. My mother destroyed Ravi's ring when he was young, so he cannot be part of the succession anymore. But now that I'm dead, he can use mine. Don't tell me it was on your body, Ludwig asked, because he clearly remembered Thomas turning up in flames. No, I don't keep it on me. That's the best way for me to lose my right as a successor. So I hid it, and it's now kept by a person of interest, to say the least. You're being shady on purpose, aren't you? Ludwig groaned. I'm just messing with you, but yeah, the person of interest is an organization. They're called White Raven. They are a big organization that organizes cells and buys information. And if you tell them these exact words, they'll give you the ring. The Phoenix lived, but the flames died out, he said. I see, Ludwig thought. Where can I find them? Ludwig asked. The closest branch is in Myra, a city that's at the border between the Dark Academy's territory and the Titania Kingdom. All you need to look for is the symbol of a white crow on one of the inns there. They'll contact you later with the item once you give them the password, Thomas said. I see, Ludwig said, that's doable. But I cannot do it right now. I cannot leave the academy for 3 years, Ludwig said. No worries, the succession battle was supposed to happen after I graduate. So you still have 3 years to do this. Right, now that I agreed to your request, tell me, how do I use emotions form souls? That's simple. First things first, can you make a fireball? Thomas asked. No, I have no idea how to do that. All I read were things that were related to class-specific subject. The act of creating a fireball or water ball or any sort of basic magic is something I have yet to learn. Thomas thought for a second and said, I saw your status screen. It shows that you have a blessed body. That's something extremely rare in this world. Thomas said, not to mention you have wisdom? I don't understand it fully and how those stats work, but it seems that it further improves your power potency. So not only will it further enhance your magical aptitude, but using emotions will double if not triple the output. As for learning a spell, try and mimic me using trace. How do you know all that? Ludwig asked. I see what you see. Also, you don't really have to worry about me spilling the beans. After all, I'm dead, and once my purpose is served I'll just go to Deus Necros side. Thomas raised his hand up, and mana began coiling around his arm, clear to Ludwig's eyes as it moved and roiled until it gathered at his palm. This is fireball. Can you replicate it? Thomas said. I don't know, I don't fully understand the process, Ludwig said as he put his hand forward. He closed his eyes, and soon mana began moving alongside his arm. He could feel his entire body heating up a bit. Every carved vein of Nephilium was exuding mana and helping Ludwig use it to create a flaming ball that swirled on the palm of his hand. For Thomas, the ball was at least twice his size, but for Ludwig it felt incredibly lacking and smaller than the one that Thomas used. I'm pretty surprised that you managed to do it on your first try, Thomas said. Yeah, I'm not that surprised about that part, Ludwig said as he was looking at a notification that appeared in front of him. You have cast the spell, Fireball. Your current understanding of the skill is too lacking to use it as a spell. Seems like I'm not proficient enough. Also, I don't know if I should learn this. After all, I can only learn 2 spells for now. Ludwig said. 2. Thomas frowned. Yeah, just 2. I'm limited. Oh, that's the first time I heard of someone being limited in learning spells. But from what I think, you're probably limited due to your mana. It's too low, I guess if you improve your wisdom stat it would help you get more spell slots. Because usually, most mags have a lot more mana than you have. Even with Van Dijk's operation and that mana stone on your forehead, I doubt you can use Fireball more than 3 times. I see, that's going to be a problem. Though it's strange, you were casting fireballs left and right. Yeah, and a couple more fire spells in the mix too. But that's because I come from a noble family and was practicing and learning magic since young. That's why my mana channels are wider than a normal person. For you, well, first you're dead. And second, you don't have the benefit of being born in a noble house. So just work on your mana for a bit now. If things don't change, just ask Van Dijk, he's pretty smart. Then what about the emotion using part? Ludwig asked. Right. It had to come to that. Thomas said, now, imagine yourself obliterating me.